On a quiet stretch of Swedish coastline, a man in his 70s is giving an interview. He's relaxed. He's tan. He wants something from the reporter standing in his driveway, not to be left alone. He wants an apology. "I wish that someone sensible would step up and say they are sorry for all that I've been through," he says. "No one has been convicted of anything. Everyone has been freed." That's not true, not even close. But he can say it on camera to American television, because the country that wants him back can't touch him here. His name is Tomo Razmilovic. He used to run one of the most successful technology companies on Long Island. Then he orchestrated one of the largest accounting frauds in American corporate history, and he's been living free ever since. Tomo Razmilovic was born in 1942 in Split, on the Croatian coast, back when it was still Yugoslavia. He studied electrical engineering in Zagreb, then moved to Sweden, where he picked up his management training and, eventually, Swedish citizenship. That citizenship is going to matter a lot later. Before Symbol Technologies, Razmilovic ran a Swedish computer company called Cominvest. He didn't leave on his own terms. He was pushed out over accounting irregularities. Nobody at Symbol seems to have asked too many questions about that. In 1989, Symbol hired him as a senior vice president. Symbol made barcode scanners, the handheld guns you'd see in every Walmart, every FedEx depot, every hospital supply closet in America. Boring technology, extremely profitable technology. Razmilovic climbed fast. Head of worldwide sales by 1993, president and chief operating officer by 1995. And in July 2000, he took the top job, president and CEO, succeeding the company's own founder. He was, by every outward measure, exactly the executive the board wanted. Aggressive, numbers obsessed, good with Wall Street. That last part should have been a warning sign. Instead, it was the reason they promoted him. Every quarter, publicly traded companies play the same game. Analysts issue a prediction for what a company's earnings will be. The company either beats that number, meets it, or misses it, and the stock reacts accordingly. At most companies, that's a forecast. At Symbol Technologies under Razmilovic, it became a mandate. Investigators would later describe Symbol as a numbers-driven culture, one obsessed with meeting Wall Street's expectations, no matter what the real underlying business was actually doing that quarter. And here's the thing about that kind of culture. It doesn't start with fraud. It starts with a bad quarter and a decision that feels almost reasonable. We'll make it up next quarter. This is just timing. Nobody gets hurt if we smooth this one number over. That decision, repeated enough times, stops being a favor to the company and starts being the only way the company can survive its own promises. By 1998, that's exactly where Symbol was. Here's where it gets specific, because this wasn't one lie. It was a system, built by a small circle of executives and carried out by the finance department itself. At the center of it was something investigators called the Tango sheet. Every quarter, the real numbers would come in from the business, and almost every quarter, they'd fall short of what Symbol had already promised Wall Street. So finance would build a sheet, not to report the shortfall, to calculate it down to the dollar, and then reverse engineer enough fake accounting entries to erase it. Think about what that means. This wasn't a rogue employee fudging a spreadsheet. It was a repeatable, institutionalized process. A template for lying run every 90 days on schedule, like payroll. Next, cookie jar reserves. In a good quarter, Symbol would overstate its expenses, booking a charge far bigger than it actually needed to. That created a hidden reserve of cash sitting in the books. Then in a bad quarter, they'd quietly release pieces of that reserve and call it earnings. Money invented in the past, spent to paper over problems in the present. Then, channel stuffing. Symbol would ship product to distributors who never actually ordered it and book the shipment as a completed sale. On paper, revenue. In reality, a warehouse somewhere just got a delivery nobody asked for. And when even that wasn't enough, there were what investigators nicknamed candy deals, selling product to a distributor with no real customer order behind it at all, and then, quietly, buying it back later. A sale that existed for exactly as long as it took to close the books that quarter, and then vanished. Finally, to keep all of this from showing up somewhere else on the balance sheet, Symbol manipulated its inventory levels and accounts receivable data, cleaning up the mess the other three schemes left behind. None of this happened in a vacuum, and none of it was one man's doing. The SEC would later lay out exactly who ran it: Razmilovic at the top, alongside his CFO, his chief accounting officer, his SVP of finance, and his SVP of sales. Below them, a second tier of finance managers and directors who actually built the fake entries and pushed the fraudulent numbers through the system. That's the answer to the question everyone asks about cases like this. How does a CEO actually get accounting to lie? He doesn't do it himself. He builds an org chart for it and puts people 2 and 3 levels down in a position where going along with it feels safer than refusing. Every fraud like this has a moment where it stops being defensible, even to the people doing it. For Symbol, court records point to one particular quarter. The real, unadjusted results came in at a loss, $2.5 million in the red. Not a catastrophe, the kind of number a healthy company survives all the time. Razmilovic personally authorized the adjustments that fixed that. When Symbol reported its results to investors, that $2.5 million loss had become a $13.4 million gain. Sit with that for a second. That's not smoothing a rough edge. That's not aggressive accounting in a gray area. That's a $16 million swing invented on one man's signature. This is the moment the frame shifts. Before this, you can almost see how someone talks themselves into it as short-term timing management. After this, there's no ambiguity left. This is manufacturing a number out of nothing and calling it truth. And Razmilovic wasn't the only one helping himself. While the earnings fraud was running, Symbol's own general counsel, Leonard Goldner, was quietly rigging the company's stock option program, backdating exercise dates to pick the most advantageous 30-day window, so that he and other senior executives could buy shares cheaper than they were supposed to. Different scheme, same building, same era, greed compounding on greed, one floor at a time. In the summer of 2002, Symbol's own internal investigation started closing in on the fraud, and the response from some of the executives involved wasn't to come clean, it was to cover their tracks. The company's CFO ordered subordinates to destroy copies of the Tango sheets. Another executive rigged the data being handed to the outside forensic accountants brought in to investigate, and told employees to sanitize records before investigators could see them. It didn't work. By the time the dust settled, Symbol was forced to restate nearly 4 years of earnings, 1998 through 2001. $234 million in revenue, gone. $325 million in net income, gone. Erased because it was never real. And Razmilovic himself? He'd already resigned, abruptly, right as the SEC inquiry started closing in. Officially, a retirement. In hindsight, the exit of a man who could see exactly what was coming. The criminal case against Razmilovic has simply never moved. He's never been arrested, never tried, never sentenced. But the SEC's civil case did reach a verdict. In 2009, after Razmilovic refused to sit for a deposition on U.S. soil, a judge entered a default judgment against him. In 2011, that judge ordered him to disgorge $41.7 million in illegal profits and pay another $20.8 million in penalties. All told, more than $60 million. He has never paid it. There's nothing forcing him to. The Swedish coastline doesn't come with an American collections agency. Symbol Technologies, the company he spent his career building, and then quietly hollowing out, never really recovered. It was acquired by Motorola in 2007, absorbed, renamed, gone. The U.S. Postal Inspection Service still lists Tomo Razmilovic as wanted. The reward for information leading to his arrest sits at $100,000. It's been there for over 2 decades. Somewhere on the Swedish coast, a man who once ran a Fortune 500 company is still, presumably, watching the tide come in. Waiting, not for justice to catch up with him. He already knows it can't. Waiting, maybe, for that apology. In June 2004, federal prosecutors indicted Razmilovic along with 7 other former Symbol executives. Securities fraud, conspiracy, a case one prosecutor called a veritable playbook of corporate fraud. Razmilovic was already in Europe. The morning of his arraignment, his lawyer called federal prosecutors in Brooklyn with a simple message: he's not coming. A warrant went out. He was declared a fugitive. And here's the piece of geography that made the entire case, in a practical sense, unwinnable. Razmilovic held Swedish citizenship, and Sweden does not extradite its own citizens for white-collar crimes to countries outside the European Union. The United States wasn't in the European Union. It still isn't. He wasn't hiding in some remote jungle outpost. He was found living openly in a small Swedish town, and later in an oceanfront villa, completely reachable, completely comfortable, completely untouchable. In 2013, 9 years into life as a fugitive, he sat down with American reporters and said the United States owed him an apology. By then, 4 of his former colleagues had already pleaded guilty. Several of them said, under oath, that Razmilovic was the one who orchestrated the entire scheme. He wasn't wrongly accused and abandoned. He was the man everyone else pointed to on their way out the door. And he still had the confidence to demand a sorry. If this story got under your skin, subscribe for more. Real cases, real money, real consequences.